There is something most of us understand, even if we have never owned a home of our own. It is the idea of a place that was yours before everything else changed, before the new chapter began, before the role arrived that redefined how the world saw you. A place that remembers who you were when nobody was watching. Queen Camilla has a place like that. It sits in the rolling hills of Wiltshire at the end of a private lane in the village of Weybridge near Laycock. It has 6 bedrooms, 12 acres of gardens, a walled swimming pool, a stable block, and beehives whose honey is sold at Fortnum and Mason for charitable causes. It is called Ray Mill House. And in late February 2026, something happened to Ray Mill House that the royal family has not addressed publicly, that no official statement has been issued about, and that has raised questions inside and outside the institution that nobody has yet fully answered. Camilla transferred it. Quietly, without announcement, without press, release without any of the choreographed communication that normally accompanies significant royal decisions. Land registry documents, first reported by the Daily Mail's Eden Confidential column, and confirmed by Hello Magazine on the 28th of February 2026, show that the registered owners of Ray Mill House are now Camilla's son-in-law Harry Lopes and financier Jake Irwin. Those two names represent Camilla's daughter Laura Lopes and her son Tom Parker Bowles. The property that Camilla bought in 1996 for £850,000, the property she described as recently as 2025 as the best therapy in the world, is no longer in her name. And I want to be careful here because the legal structure matters to understanding what this story actually is. GB News, reporting on the 17th of March 2026, clarified that Harry Lopes and Jake Irwin hold the legal title as trustees, meaning the property is held in a trust for the benefit of Camilla's children, with Lopes and Irwin as the trustees who manage it. The beneficial ownership, the right to use and enjoy the property, remains connected to the family. Camilla herself has not been excluded from Ray Mill. But the name on the deeds has changed. And in the world of royal property, where names on documents carry institutional and symbolic weight that goes far beyond the purely legal, that change matters considerably. Keep that in mind. Because in a few minutes, I am going to tell you about a second transaction, a purchase that was completed almost simultaneously with this transfer. And when you hear those two things together, the meaning of both changes entirely. Before we go any further, if you find that this channel gives you the kind of careful, unhurried royal coverage that is genuinely hard to find, please take a moment to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because what I am about to walk you through in the next few minutes is the part of this story that most coverage has missed entirely. To understand why Ray Mill House matters as much as it does, you have to go back to 1994. That was the year Camilla's marriage to Andrew Parker Bowles ended in divorce. The marriage had lasted 22 years and produced 2 children, a Tom, born in 1974, and Laura, born in 1978. The divorce was finalized in January 1995, and the following year, in 1996, Camilla purchased Ray Mill House for £850,000 using private funds. The village of Weybridge, near Laycock in Wiltshire, placed her in the same county as Highgrove, King Charles's country estate, which sits approximately 35 miles away. The proximity was deliberate. The relationship between Camilla and Charles, long the subject of public scrutiny and painful commentary, was at that point still years away from any formal recognition. Ray Mill was where Camilla built a private life during that period of uncertainty. She lived at Ray Mill as her primary residence between 1996 and 2003. That's his 7-year period covered some of the most difficult years of her public life, the aftermath of the divorce, the sustained media hostility, the death of Diana in August 1997, and the gradual, fragile process of public rehabilitation that eventually led to her marriage to Charles on the 9th of April 2005. Royal Central, reporting on the 4th of March 2026, noted that Ray Mill had particular sentimental value not only for Camilla, but for her children. In 2006, Laura Lopes and her husband Harry held their wedding reception in the gardens of Ray Mill House. Those gardens, incidentally, were designed under Charles's personal supervision, a detail I will return to because it becomes significant later in this story. After her marriage to Charles, Ray Mill became Camilla's secondary residence rather than her primary home. She and Charles lived primarily at Clarence House in London and Highgrove in Gloucestershire. but a home she had chosen and purchased with her own money during the years when she had very little institutional protection. Hello Magazine, reporting on the 2nd of March 2026, noted that after the death of Queen Elizabeth II in September 2022, Camilla returned to Ray Mill House as a place of solitude during the week of national mourning that followed. The property that had sheltered her during personal difficulty was the place she turned to again during public grief. That is the sentimental and personal context behind a legal document. And that context is the reason the transfer of this property to a trust structure has generated the level of interest it has. Not because trust arrangements are unusual in wealthy families, but because of what they imply about Camilla's thinking about the future, and because of what else was happening in Wiltshire at almost exactly the same time. And what Camilla's family discovered when they looked at the full picture was this. On the 17th of March 2026, the Daily Mail's Eden Confidential column, the same column that had broken the news of the Ray Mill transfer, published a second story. It revealed that King Charles had spent £3.75 million purchasing a property called the Old Mill, located in Raybridge, Wiltshire, sharing a private lane with Ray Mill House. The purchase had been completed in March 2025 through a company called Frisa Nominees Limited, which was registered in February 2025 with Buckingham Palace listed as its correspondence address. 2 royal employees were listed as company directors. GB News confirmed the figures on the 17th of March 2026. Hello Magazine confirmed them on the same date. The Old Mill is a 4-bedroom property dating from the Norman Conquest, set on 2 acres of land with views of the River Avon. It previously sold 8 years ago for £675,000. Charles paid £3.75 million. According to reporting by Newsweek on the 17th of March 2026, the reason for the purchase was specific and urgent. Charles had learned that the Old Mill was at risk of being converted into a commercial wedding venue. A wedding venue on a private lane shared with Camilla's personal retreat would have meant vehicles, noise, commercial traffic, and the permanent end of the privacy that Ray Mill had provided since 1996. The purchase was made to prevent that from happening. Camilla's security and peace of mind were the stated motivation. And for a brief moment, reading these 2 stories in sequence, it seemed as though the situation was entirely coherent. Camilla places Ray Mill into a trust structure for her children's future benefit. Charles spends £3.75 million to protect Camilla's privacy on the same private lane. Both transactions reflect the same thing. Thoughtful planning for the long term, protecting a property that matters deeply to the family. That is what it looked like on the surface. But when you place the 2 transactions side by side with their specific dates, something more complicated emerges. And that is the detail that most coverage has glossed over. If you have stayed with me this far, I think you already know that this channel takes these stories seriously. Please subscribe if you have not already, because what comes next is the detail that reframes everything we have discussed so far. Charles completed the purchase of the Old Mill in March 2025. He spent £3.75 million of private funds protecting a private lane, the same lane that leads to Ray Mill House. The land registry documents showing the transfer of Ray Mill into the trust structure with Harry Lopes and Jake Irwin as registered owners were identified by the Daily Mail and confirmed by multiple outlets in late February 2026. The 2 transactions are separated by approximately 11 months. Charles spent £3.75 million in March 2025 to protect a property that, by February 2026, was no longer in his name. Not an accusation, not a claim of conflict. The correct framing is this. 2 significant financial and legal decisions were made about the same private lane in Wiltshire within an 11-month period, and they appear not to have been coordinated, or if they were, the coordination has not been explained publicly. Buckingham Palace has issued no statement about the Ray Mill transfer. No timeline has been given for when the trust arrangement was put in place. No explanation has been offered for why the transfer occurred when it did. There are 3 reasons why this story is generating the level of institutional discomfort that it is, and none of them are the one most people immediately assume. The first reason is the timing. The Ray Mill transfer was reported on the 28th of February 2026, 15 days after Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor was arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office on the 19th of February, his 66th birthday. The arrest had consumed the palace's media management resources. Every senior communications officer was focused on Andrew. It was, as Hello Magazine's reporting on the 28th of February noted explicitly, while the eyes of the world rested on Andrew's arrest, that Camilla was quietly offloading her private property. The timing did not attract the scrutiny it might otherwise have received. Whether that timing was deliberate is unknown. No official statement has been made. But the coincidence of the two events has been noted by royal commentators, including Royal Central, whose March 2026 reporting described the transfer as happening quietly at a moment when royal attention was directed elsewhere. The second reason is what the trust arrangement implies about Camilla's forward planning, and specifically about what happens when William becomes king. This is the institutional tension that nobody in the formal media has addressed directly, but which underpins every conversation about Camilla's long-term position. When King Charles III dies, Camilla will become Queen Dowager, the formal designation for a widowed Queen Consort. She will no longer have automatic entitlement to Clarence House, which would pass to William and Catherine as the new monarch's official London residence. She would no longer have the same institutional standing that currently comes with being the reigning Queen Consort. The list, reporting in July 2025, noted that Camilla could find herself packing and moving again, possibly to a royal property of William's choosing. By placing Ray Mill into a trust structure that benefits her children, Camilla has ensured that there is at least one property, a property that is hers by history, if not by current title, that is protected from whatever institutional rearrangements a future reign might bring. That is not a criticism. That is a mother securing her children's future, and in doing so, securing her own fallback position. But it is a calculation. And calculations of this kind, made quietly and without announcement, have a way of landing differently when they become public. The third reason is the one that involves Charles most directly, and it is the one that makes the most senior members of the royal household most uncomfortable. Charles designed the gardens at Ray Mill House personally. He supervised their creation during the years when he and Camilla maintained their relationship outside of any formal public acknowledgement. Those gardens, with their 12 acres, their beehives, their walled pool, their careful planting, they represent Charles's contribution to a home that Camilla owned, but that he helped shape. He then spent £3.75 million to protect the view from that garden, using palace staff to establish a company to make the purchase without his name appearing directly on the transaction. And the property those gardens belong to is no longer in Camilla's name. The man who protected the lane in March 2025 was protecting access to garden he had helped design, attached to a house that was already, or would soon be, in the process of passing to his wife's children by her first husband. That is not a conspiracy. That is a human and institutional story of considerable complexity, and it is the complexity that the palace has chosen not to address. And this is the part that most coverage has missed. The honey from the beehives at Ray Mill House is sold at Fortnum and Mason. The proceeds go to charitable causes. That detail was confirmed by the property information website Grokopedia and corroborated by royal reporting from My Weekly magazine in January 2026. It is a small detail, but it illustrates something significant about how Ray Mill has functioned, not merely as a private retreat, but as a working property with commercial and charitable dimensions that are entirely separate from the royal household's official operations. When a property with charitable income streams and commercial agricultural dimensions is transferred into a trust, the question of what the trust's terms cover, who manages the charitable dimensions, who controls the commercial activity, who makes decisions about the beehives and the honey and the Fortnum and Mason relationship, is not a trivial one. No information about the trust's specific terms has been made public. The registered trustees are Harry Lopes and Jake Irwin. Their precise responsibilities under the trust deed have not been disclosed. Now let us think carefully about what might happen next. There are three possible futures here, each grounded in what we know from the people involved and from the institutional precedents that exist. The first possibility is that the trust arrangement is precisely what it appears to be, a sensible piece of inheritance planning, carried out by a 78-year-old Queen Consort who's thinking responsibly about the long-term security of her children and grandchildren. Royal Central noted on the 4th of March 2026 that Ray Mill holds particular sentimental value for the family, given that Laura's wedding reception was held there in 2006. Placing the property in a trust structure that protects it from inheritance tax liability and ensures it passes cleanly to Laura and Tom is, by this reading, an act of responsible family stewardship with no deeper significance. The old mill purchase by Charles is separately motivated, privacy and security, and the fact that both transactions involve the same private lane is incidental rather than coordinated. If this is the correct reading, the story ends here, and the property continues as a family refuge for Camilla's children and grandchildren. The second possibility is that the trust arrangement reflects Camilla's genuine assessment that her position within the royal household is less secure than it publicly appears, that she is preparing, carefully and quietly, for a future in which the institutional protection she currently enjoys may not endure into the next reign. The list's reporting from July 2025 is specific on this point. When William becomes king, Camilla's housing, title, and institutional standing are all subject to decisions that will ultimately be William's to make. By securing Ray Mill for her children now, while Charles is still king, and while her influence over property decisions remains at its highest, Camilla is ensuring that whatever happens in the next chapter, she has a fallback that does not depend on William's goodwill. That is not paranoia. That is the calculation of a woman who spent 30 years navigating an institution that was openly hostile to her, and who learned during those 30 years that the only security that lasts is the security you create for yourself. The third possibility is the most structurally interesting, and it involves the old mill purchase most directly. Charles spent £3.75 million, private money, routed through a freshly created company registered to Buckingham Palace, to protect the privacy of a property that was simultaneously being transferred out of his wife's legal ownership. The question that has not been asked publicly is whether Charles knew the transfer was happening when he completed the purchase. If he did know, then the old mill purchase was made with full awareness that he was protecting a lane that leads to a house his wife was giving to her children. If he did not know, then the two most significant financial decisions made about the same piece of land in Wiltshire in an 11-month period were not coordinated between husband and wife. Neither reading is comfortable for the institution. Both raise questions that the palace has so far declined to answer. And this brings us, in the end, back to where we started. If this kind of storytelling matters to you, patient, detailed, and always respectful of the people at the center of these stories, please subscribe and share this video with someone who you think would appreciate it. It genuinely helps this channel continue doing exactly this kind of work. This is not a story about a property transfer. At its heart, it is a story about the one thing every person in a very public role eventually has to confront. What belongs to you, and only to you, when everything else belongs to the role. Ray Mill was the place Camilla built during the years when the institution did not recognize her. It was where she gardened, where she sought solace after the Queen's death, where her daughter was married, where bees made honey for charity. It was, in the deepest sense, hers. And she has chosen to give it to her children while she is still in a position of strength, while she is still Queen Consort, still able to make that decision on her own terms, still the one controlling the timing and the structure of that gift. The people watching this who have lived long enough to understand why someone would do that, who have watched a parent make a quiet decision to secure the next generation before circumstances change, those are the viewers I'm thinking of as I close this story. You have stayed because you understand that behind the land registry documents and the trust structures and the company registration numbers, there is a woman who learned the hard way that nothing in that institution is guaranteed and who acted accordingly. The question I want to leave you with is this. Do you think Camilla was right to make this move quietly, without explanation or announcement? Or do you think that a queen consort making significant property decisions, decisions that involve palace staff, private companies, and a husband who spent £3.75 million protecting the same piece of land, owes the public a more transparent account of her thinking? Leave your answer in the comments below. I read every one of them, and this is exactly the kind of question worth sitting with.